In early 1945, German tank crews were still clinging to the belief that their Tigers and Panthers were untouchable. Years of battlefield dominance had created a myth, one where German armor reigned supreme, shrugging off Allied shells and rolling through Europe with terrifying confidence. But then, something happened that cracked that illusion wide open. It happened in Cologne. March 1945. German crews, expecting to mop up yet another wave of supposedly inferior Allied armor, found themselves face to face with something they didn't recognize.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
It looked like an American tank, but it wasn't like the Shermans they were used to outgunning. It was bigger, stronger, and deadlier. The M26 Pershing had arrived. What the Germans didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that behind the scenes, the US had been quietly working on a technological and industrial counterpunch. Years of frustration against superior German tanks had pushed American engineers to the edge. And finally, they delivered. The M26 Pershing was built in secret, developed away from the battlefield spotlight. It carried a 90mm gun capable of piercing even the mighty Tiger's armor, and it changed everything. To the German crews, the shock was immediate. Their entire tactical doctrine had been based on the assumption that Allied tanks couldn't match them, that their armor, their firepower, their engineering were leagues ahead. But now, here was an American tank firing from longer ranges, cutting through their armor like it was paper. The Cologne encounter wasn't just another skirmish. It was psychological warfare in real time. That first documented battle, between a Pershing and a Panther right in front of the Cologne Cathedral, didn't just result in a German tank going up in flames. It sent a shockwave through the Wehrmacht. The 90mm gun tore through the German tank's frontal armor at a distance the Americans were never supposed to dominate. For the first time in years, it wasn't the Germans setting the terms of the engagement. The advantage flipped, and it flipped fast. And here's the thing, there weren't even that many Pershings on the battlefield. Fewer than 2,000 saw action before the war ended, but they didn't need to be everywhere. The damage wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The moment German crews realized there was something new on the battlefield that could kill them before they could even react, the entire dynamic changed. Until then, German tanks had carried a kind of battlefield swagger. The Tiger, with its nearly impenetrable armor and devastating 88mm gun, had become a legend. The Panther followed suit, sleeker, more mobile, but still a terror. American Shermans were often nicknamed Ronsons because they lit up the first time. So when Pershing started showing up, German confidence didn't just take a hit, it collapsed. That aura of superiority gone. And while the Pershing was absolutely a technological marvel featuring advanced optics, ergonomic design, and serious firepower, what really tipped the scales was America's industrial muscle. The US didn't need to perfect the art of the tank. It just needed to get good enough, fast enough, and scale up, while the Germans were still hand-building theirs like luxury cars. German tank production was elite, sure, but also painfully slow. Every Tiger was an expensive, delicate machine that took months to build and maintain. America, on the other hand, had an assembly line system humming at full tilt. Once they locked in the Pershing's design, production accelerated. Over 2,200 were built by the end of the war. It wasn't just about quality. It was about quantity, speed, and adaptability. While the Germans stuck to the idea of perfection, fewer tanks, better specs, America bet on good enough tech, supported by overwhelming numbers and rapid deployment. And in the final stretch of the war, that strategy crushed the myth of German tank invincibility. The psychological impact ran deeper than anyone expected. German tank crews, who had once charged into battle assuming they had the upper hand, started hesitating. Engagements were avoided. Tanks were abandoned. Confidence, once sky-high, evaporated almost overnight. In war, morale is everything. And the Pershing didn't just break through armor, it broke through illusions. The Germans had spent years believing they held the technological edge. That belief shaped their tactics, their doctrines, their very identity on the battlefield. But the arrival of the Pershing proved that the edge was gone. In some ways, it had never truly been there to begin with, only reinforced by early victories and underwhelming Allied armor. Now, they were facing a tank that didn't just match them. It beat them, and the Germans knew it. Veterans would later admit that the appearance of the Pershing marked a turning point. Some even described it as a psychological defeat. They weren't just losing battles, they were losing belief. In the final weeks of the war, as Allied forces closed in, German defenses became more chaotic. Orders were ignored.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Units broke apart. It wasn't just about being outnumbered, it was about being outclassed. For once, American tanks weren't playing catch-up. They were leading. The Pershing was a symbol, not just of American firepower but of American industrial democracy, innovation, and adaptability. It stood as proof that mass production, when paired with smart engineering, could outperform even the most meticulously crafted war machines. And that's what Germany couldn't compete with. Perfection didn't matter when you couldn't make enough of it. And the psychological blow. It echoed far beyond the battlefield. German soldiers saw their best equipment being neutralized by a country they thought they had out-engineered. And once that belief cracked, the rest followed. Confidence gave way to fear. Discipline gave way to disarray. And the war, already tipping against them, accelerated toward its inevitable conclusion. The Pershing didn't win the war alone, but it played a critical role in breaking the final illusion of German superiority. It revealed that the war wasn't going to be decided by the best tank on paper but by the best combination of firepower, speed, morale, and manufacturing. And in that equation, America had already won. Today, surviving Pershings sit in museums as relics of a turning point. They're reminders of how engineering and industry, backed by national will, can change the course of history. And more importantly, they expose the myth that high-tech always wins. Because without production, without scale, without morale, even the best machines become useless. The German tank legacy Tigers, Panthers, the whole mythos still gets romanticized. But for the crews who saw a Pershing roll onto the battlefield in 1945, there was no romance. Just the realization that the war had turned and it was no longer turning in their favor. So next time someone tells you the Tiger was the best tank of World War II, ask them one thing. If it was so unstoppable, why did it stop? If you're into military history, overlooked turning points, or just want to dive deeper into the stories behind the myths, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe for more breakdowns. Let us know, was the Pershing underrated, or did it arrive too late? We'd love to hear your take. The thing is, no one really saw it coming. Not the German high command, not the Panther crews patrolling the ruins of Cologne, and definitely not the Tiger tank gunners who'd spend years laughing off American shells like they were getting hit with pebbles. They had no reason to expect the script to flip until the Pershing rolled in and blew their confidence straight through the front glacis. What made it even more jarring was how long the Americans had let themselves play second fiddle in tank design. For most of the war, the Sherman was the face of U.S. armor, plentiful, yes, but famously undergunned and underarmored. It was fast and could be produced in massive numbers, but head-to-head with a Tiger, it was toast. German crews were used to that rhythm. Engage, destroy, move on. Lather, rinse, repeat. So when that new silhouette showed up, sleeker than a Sherman, lower profile than a Tiger, but packing a 90mm gun that could knock out German armor from hundreds of meters away, it didn't just shift battlefield strategy. It short-circuited the enemy's entire understanding of how American tanks were supposed to perform. One of the most striking moments came from that infamous duel outside the Cologne Cathedral. The whole thing was caught on camera. A German Panther sits at the end of the street, waiting. Out of view, an M26 Pershing creeps into range. One clean shot from the Pershing's 90mm gun and the Panther is done. Explodes into a fireball. No second chances. No long-range dance. Just brutal, instant proof that the rules of armored warfare had changed. That footage wasn't just propaganda gold, it was a death knell for the myth of German tank invincibility. It spread quickly, too. Among Allied troops, it was validation that the tide was turning. But among German ranks, it bred confusion, hesitation, and a creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, the war was lost not because of strategy or numbers but because of belief. The Germans had believed their tanks were superior. They'd believed their armor couldn't be cracked. And suddenly, that belief was shattered. There's something devastating about losing the psychological war. Before the Pershing, German tank crews felt invulnerable like modern-day knights with machines no one could rival. But after that first Pershing engagement, reports started coming in. Crews refusing to engage. Abandoned Panthers. Tigers left without a fight. They weren't just outnumbered, they were demoralized. And it wasn't just the gun. The Pershing had features that German tanks lacked, like advanced optics that let American gunners lock on quickly and accurately. Its turret traverse system was faster, allowing it to react in real time, instead of sluggishly turning like many German heavies. And unlike the cramped, sometimes chaotic interiors of a Panther or Tiger, the Pershing was designed with the crew in mind. Everything was positioned for efficiency, visibility, and protection. These were the kinds of small design decisions that made a huge difference under fire. Even the tank crews themselves started noticing. Reports from the front described how American crews felt safer, more confident, and more in control while operating the Pershing. That kind of morale shift doesn't just affect one skirmish, it changes how you approach every single engagement. Meanwhile, Germany's obsession with high-spec, over-engineered vehicles had started to backfire. Sure, the Tiger was a beast, but it guzzled fuel, broke down constantly, and took an army of mechanics to keep running. It wasn't scalable. It wasn't sustainable. And by the time the Allies were pushing into Germany proper, that elite engineering was more of a liability than an asset. While German factories were being bombed and resources were drying up, the US had industrial production down to a science. Assembly lines were churning out tanks like it was an auto plant. And that's because, in many ways, it was an auto plant. American manufacturers had retooled their entire operations to support the war effort, pumping out vehicles, weapons, and parts with terrifying efficiency. So yes, the Pershing was late to the game, but it didn't need to show up earlier. Its arrival at the exact moment of German desperation gave it a kind of mythic status, like a checkmate piece moved just in time. And what's wild is how few of them actually saw combat. Out of the 2,200 built, only a few hundred made it to the front lines before Germany surrendered. But again, it wasn't about the numbers. It was about the message. When German veterans looked back after the war, many admitted that seeing the Pershing for the first time was the moment they realized their days of domination were over. It wasn't just a better tank, it was proof that the Allies had caught up, that the edge Germany had clung to since 1942 was gone. Even more unsettling, the realization that America hadn't even needed to use its best tech until the very end, that this powerful machine had been sitting in reserve, kept under wraps, until the time was right. The Pershing didn't just defeat German tanks, it defeated German assumptions. And in war, that kind of psychological gut punch is lethal. The fallout was immediate. German doctrine, built around the idea of long-range dominance, started to collapse. Tactical plans that relied on the Tiger's invulnerability no longer held up. Commanders found themselves scrambling to adapt, but it was too late. The battlefield had evolved beyond them. And here's where the contrast really hits. The Germans built masterpieces, complicated, beautiful, deadly machines that looked good on paper but crumbled under pressure. The Americans, they built for scale, for practicality, for war. The Pershing was the perfect symbol of that. It wasn't just a tank, it was the embodiment of American industrial democracy, a product of coordination, collaboration, and the relentless drive to improve. It didn't need to be the flashiest, it just needed to show up, do the job, and keep doing it again and again and again. And that's exactly what happened. In the final months of the war, as Allied forces closed in and German positions fell one after another, the Pershing kept rolling. Not everywhere, not in massive numbers, but where it mattered. And every time it appeared, it chipped away at what little confidence the German army had left. After the war, the legacy of the Pershing only grew. It became the blueprint for future U.S. armored doctrine, combining firepower, crew survivability, and production efficiency. In post-war reflections, even German military analysts acknowledged that the arrival of the Pershing signaled the end of any hopes they had of reversing their losses. That moment in Cologne, it wasn't just a battle. It was a turning point. It proved that the tide had shifted and that belief in German technological superiority was officially dead. The Pershing didn't need to be everywhere. It just needed to be known. Once word got out, once German crews realized that a new kind of threat was on the field, the psychological impact did the rest. And that's the part of warfare people often overlook. You can win a fight with firepower, but you win a war by breaking the enemy's will. And that's exactly what the Pershing did. So next time someone brings up the Tiger as the peak of World War II tank warfare, just remember, even legends get dethroned. And sometimes, all it takes is one well-timed arrival, one clean shot, and one broken belief to bring the whole myth crashing down. Here's the part no one really talks about. The Pershing didn't just change the battlefield, it changed the vibe. Up until 1945, the mood on the ground for American tankers had been one of grim acceptance. They knew the Sherman was reliable, easy to fix, and there were a lot of them. But they also knew it was outgunned. When you're rolling into a fight knowing that your best hope is to flank a panther and pray you're faster, that does something to you. But the Pershing? That was different. For the first time in the entire war, American crews had a tank they believed in. One that could stand up to a tiger. One that didn't need to rely on numbers or clever positioning. That belief, just like it had once powered German morale, was now shifting. And that's the irony. The same sense of superiority that once defined the German armored corps began creeping into the American side, but in a way that was actually sustainable. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence backed by production. The Pershing gave American troops the psychological edge they'd been missing, and at the worst possible time for Germany. Because once German crews started hearing the whispers, there's a new American tank out there, it's bigger, it's better, it killed a panther in one shot, they started second-guessing everything. Is that a Sherman up ahead? Or is it that one? Do we engage? Or do we pull back? That split-second hesitation, that uncertainty, that's how momentum shifts. And let's be clear, by 1945, the Germans couldn't afford to hesitate. The Pershing was the final nail in a coffin that had been built by years of attrition, overextension, and industrial mismatch. It wasn't just a tank, it was a signal that the US was no longer just throwing bodies and machines at the problem. Now, they were matching firepower for firepower, and still outproducing everyone in the process. That's the lesson that echoed into the post-war era. All those strategic meetings, those military doctrine rewrites, the shift towards standardized mass-produced armor, it all traced back to moments like Cologne, where a single engagement proved that quality, quantity, and morale could come together in one steel-clad, 90mm firing monster. So, yeah, the Pershing didn't win the war alone. But it showed up exactly when it needed to, just long enough to break the myth, flip the narrative, and prove that the tank that gets built in time is worth more than the perfect one that arrives too late. Thanks for sticking through this one. If this kind of deep dive into military turning points is your thing, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got more forgotten legends, hidden moments, and tactical game changers coming your way. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.